Right. Yeah, Faza, please go ahead.
Okay, cool. Let me start. I'll share my screen. I'll just share it. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, cool. Okay, today I'm gonna talk about the Turborepo or Monorepo without headache. Yeah, but before we go to the Turborepo, I want to let like a give some explanation first about what is monorepo and compared to a traditional repository. So what is monorepo? Well, monorepo is a single repository that stores all of your code and assets for every project. So if we compare to traditional repository, we might have a lot of repository. For example, in many repository here, there are one repository for backend, for example, and then one repository for front end, and then maybe one repository for mobile application, for example. And if you are using microservices, you might find there are a lot of repository per service. So by using monorepo, the difference is we only have one single repository. So all the projects will be stored in one single repository. That's the main difference between the multi-repository and then monorepository. So monorepo is usually best for the first one is about the feasibility, because of course, when we are using a single repository, we can see all of the codes for multi-projects that we have. So it will help us to manage the dependencies, of course. And then the second one is about the collaboration. By having a single repository, it makes us easier to collaborate because everyone can have the access to every project, right? So developer can share and reuse the components or the assets. And then the last one may be about the speed of development. By using the single repository, you can accelerate the development. For example, we can create a single changes for multiple projects. So that's the advantages using monorepo. And I have some example cases here. For example, Google is one of the big company that use monorepo. And in 2015, the Google Monorepo held 86 terabytes of data and then 2 billion lines of code and then 9 million unique source files. Can you imagine how big the Monorepo? And then that's only one of the example. As I know, Salesforce, Facebook, and Twitter is also there. They are also famously using monorepos. If you wonder why, it's simply because using monorepo is a key to open and collaborative culture. So it looks really good by using monorepo, right? But what are the challenges using monorepo then? As we already know, monorepos are incredible for productivity, but the tooling can be very nightmare for monorepo. It can take maybe a full week to just make a good configurations. So the tooling with monorepo is quite challenging here. That's one of the downside. There might be some other downside about the monorepos, but I'm not trying to explain more about that. I only want to focus about the tooling one because this problem that we want to solve, I want to explain how to solve this one. And based on this problem, there's uh, a tool called Turborepo that I want to explain to you. So what is Turborepo? A Turborepo is a blazing fast build system for JavaScript or TypeScript monorepos. So unfortunately, this one is for only for JavaScript and TypeScript. So for another for other engineers that comes from another universe. Maybe so. Unfortunately, this is for only for JavaScript and TypeScript only. Yeah, the point is this Turborepo is how we can make a good configurations in Monorepo, so we can make easily configurations while using Monorepo. So Turborepo was created by Jared Palmer in early 2021. So he's a software engineer based in USA, if I'm not wrong, and he has contributed for a lot of source code, open source library. And then by just 3 months ago, in December 2021, it is acquired by Versal. So what is the feature that Turborepo has for Monorepo? I'll try to demo this one by one. So I think better to explain this by directly to demo to you. The first one is parallel execution. So Turborepo can execute bullets using every core at maximum parallelism without wasting idle CPUs. So I'll try to demo the parallel execution first. I've set up a project here. So if I'll go to the README first. In this repository, there are a lot of apps and package. The apps is where the API, the application stored. For example, the first one, we have API application, which is developed by Express. And then the second one, there are storefront using Next.js. This is the front end application. And then there is also admin application where we are using Fight here. So, and the last one, there is also blog application using Remix. And there are also packages. So if we look at the directory here, there are apps where we can put our application, and there are also packages. Packages is a place where we can put our package that can be shared for multiple projects. For example, this one we have Flogger package that we can use in every project, and then also the script is contains of JS configuration that we can use for multiple projects as well. And then there is TypeScript configurations, and then also there's UI package that if you look at it is actually React component. So we can share this component, we can use this component for multiple projects. So that's the difference between apps and packages. So if we look at here, it is multi-framework application, right? So like admin and API and blog and storefront using a different framework. So it's I hear someone talking. Okay, let's me continue. Yeah, the point is this one is multi-project with multi-framework, so it is completely multi-framework. There are a lot of different. So I'm gonna try to run a command from Turbo, npx turbo run build. This command will build all the project that we have. Just we run it for now. If you look at here, it will run it in parallel. So it doesn't run it one by one, but it will run for us parallel. Like for example, we run it for the UI build. At the same time, we run the logger, the API, the admin, the blog, and all the projects run in parallel. That's one of the feature from Turborepo. So we don't have to wait one by one, but we do it together. Okay. So basically, when we try to run this command npx turbo run build, it will try to check on every package JSON and then run the build script. So it will run the build script on the admin application. It will run the build script on the API, this one, and etc. and so on, so on. So that's the Turborepo running when we run this code. So that's the first feature of parallel execution. We don't wait to run the steps until finish, but we do it together. And then the second feature is incremental builds. Turborepo will automatically remember what you have built and skip the stuff that's already been computed. For example, we have already built before, right? Using the first one when I explained you about the parallel execution. If we try to run it again, it will instantly finish. We don't, the Turborepo don't build all of them again. So it will make a cache for you. So it will just get the data from the cache. So everything that has been done before, we will not do it again. So basically, when we run, for example, the build stuff, it will create a cache here, the turbo cache. So if we delete this, it will try to rebuild again. So the cool thing about this one, if you try to, for example, I'm the backend developer, and then I'm trying to update our backend application. Like for example, we are app running on, yeah, just make changes on the API, and then we run a build again. Yeah, basically we only run the API build, and then the rest we got it from the cache. So we don't build all of the things again, but the Turborepo will detect what changes that you made. For example, in this case, I made the changes in the API, so it will only run a build on the API only. That's the cool thing. That's why on the second feature called, it will remember what you have built and then skip the stuff that's already been computed. And this is not only for the build, but also for example, we can run tests to run all of the tests. And then we can also run, for example, the lean. Yeah, everything we can do that. Yeah, and we try to run it again, it will automatically finish instantly without run it again. So that's the second feature of the incremental build. And then the third one, the task pipelines. So there's a feature from Turborepo that we can define the relationship between our tasks. For example, if we in the first feature we have parallel executions, and the good part of it, it is actually configurable. So we can define what task that depends on which task. So we can define on the pipelines. For example, in this repository, we have turbo.json. So this is where we put the pipeline here. And then, for example, I'll try to create API, for example, build this one, and then we can make it the API build should be depends on, for example, let's say API test. Okay, if you run it again, the npx turbo run build, it is actually before we run the API build, it should be run the API test, the API test, because we define that the API build requires to run the API test. So that's the cool feature where we can define the dependency of the task. And then if we want to also just run the API build, we can just do it something like this: npx turbo run API build. It only run this code, which is running the API test first and then the API build. So we're talking about the parallel execution. It is actually configurable. So we can set which one to be run the first, and then which one to be run the second. That's for the task pipelines. And then the last one is remote caching. I am not actually try to demo this one, since if we look at on the documentation on the Turborepo, for the remote caching, I think it requires the Vercel account. So I haven't any Vercel account. So, but I'll try to explain what is remote caching and then how can it be useful for us as a developer. So basically, the remote caching is the same as local caching. So if I have told you before that when we run a bullet, for example, it will try to make a cache here, this one. So this is the local cache, but the remote cache is exactly the same, but we put everything here in the cloud. So using Vercel. So what makes it different? The big advantage if we are using remote caching is actually you can share your cache with your teammates. So whenever, for example, there's a new developer that's coming, we can just using the remote caching. So even on their local, they are not they will not build all of the things again. They just use the cache that we have. And then one thing that for sure, the advantage of remote caching is for CI/CD tools, because when we are using CI/CD, most of the time we will build, for example, before we deploy, we usually build the applications on the Docker container that comes from a fresh image, right? So the local remote will not working there. And then by using remote caching, it will be very useful. So for example, we can create deployment script, and then for example, we only made only on the API. So by using the remote caching, it will get the cache with what kind of changes. For example, the changes only on the API, and then you will only deploy to the API. So traditionally, when we are talking about the CI/CD on the monorepo, we usually create a multiple branch. For example, branch for API, branch for front end. So when we made changes to that branch, we trigger the CI/CD to the deployment, which means API or front end. So by using Turborepo, we don't need that because we have remote caching. So it will automatically detect what kind of changes, and then it can only deploy to that application only. So I think that's it that I can share to you. If you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, maybe yeah, it's a really cool tools that you sell to us. But I have some question regarding the security things, like maybe the access right, because this monorepo is contain all the application inside the one repo, right? So maybe if they have any access right for this one, because as you said, there's maybe they have the API, maybe have the storefront front end application. So maybe there are some developer only access only can access to the API source code, then some developer only can access to the storefront front end source code. So whether this Turborepo have this kind of access control access right controlling.
Yep, that's a good one. How we tackle the security issues? I mean, like, how can we prevent the backend developer can make a changes on the front end, right? So I think Turborepo doesn't have the feature to tackle this one, but I think the Git, if we are using the Git version control, it can be it. They have the Git have a security level as well. For example, if we set one branch, for example, the development branch, there not all the developer can make a change to the development, which development is maybe the big branch. So the one developer needs to make a changes to development by using the pull request, and then by the pull request, maybe as a team leader, maybe we can check if you are backend engineer, you make sure you only make on the backend application. So I think that's one way that we can use to prevent to tackle about the security issues.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. Yeah, that's enough for me.
Anyone else? Husky, yeah, I think we can use Husky as well. Before we make commit, create maybe some profiling that we are, what kind of projects that we are involving, so we can limit in. Maybe we can use Husky as well. Yeah, that's right, David.
Yeah, I can use Husky also, but I think the PR things is already correct also. So we should make PR to merge the development and someone need to improve it. Yep. Any more questions, guys? Here. Okay. So yeah, if there's no other question, you sure about it? Okay. So yeah, it's a very cool tool, I think. So I'm using it in one of my project also, but not, I think not Monorepo, but the NPM. We are using it on Rejig, I think, for Australia team, and yeah, it works really great. So we can like make all of the code in one single repository, but it's a huge code, to be honest, if it's getting developed. So if you see the Git timeline, there will be many commit from other developer because we are squeezing all the commit into one timeline. Yeah, I think that's the downside of Monorepo. So we can not really track. Yeah, we can track the Git, but it has a lot of Git history on it because everyone code in that repository, right? So yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's the downside. There will be huge amount of PR, huge amount of, yeah.
yeah,
You
that's
can
one
see
of
all
the
of the PR
downside.
get squeezed into one repository.
Yeah,
And yeah, you can see how much it is. And there will be a much more PR and Git
yeah,
history. I think that's the downside. But to simplify the process, yeah, I think it's good. But I think it's more like the tech lead choice whether you want to use it or not. But thank you, Faza. That is a really good presentation, and we see also the Monorepo getting pretty hype right now, and we already know about it, and that's great for our development also. Right, guys, thank you, and see you on the other weekly tech meeting. I think next week we have APEC tech rep, so there won't be anyone share, but we got a tech rep. Okay, thank you guys for coming. Have a good Monday. Bye.